This is 20 Minutes of Impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast, sponsored by Schneider Electric. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the podcast, recorded live at Schneider Electric's 2025 Innovation Summit, we're going to talk with Ruben Llanes, Schneider Electric CEO for Digital Grid. Ruben's going to describe Schneider Electric's just launched One Digital Grid platform and why it could be the future of energy intelligence. Ruben took over the Digital Grid division in May 2024 after an almost 25-year career, including over 14 years in executive positions with Schneider Electric and its subsidiaries, and over 9 years in finance with multinational giant Deutsche Bank. So Ruben, what is Schneider Electric's One Digital Grid platform? Why do you call it the future of energy intelligence? And how did you collaborate with Microsoft and Esri in creating it?
Yeah. So first of all, Herman, thank you very much for making the time to chat with us today. This is some news that we're very excited about. So let me take this one step at a time. So I think first, you ask about why the future, and I'll come back to each of these pieces progressively. I think in order to talk about the future, it's important to have the context of the past.
Good.
And so if we start with the past, what have we had historically with utilities? So historically, they've had siloed solutions that would be used in planning, and they'd be used in different parts of the grid life cycle, which is interesting, but it is an unfulfilled example of what could be.
Absolutely.
And so you have these discrete solutions. And so as we started to think about what the world might look like, right now we talked over the past couple of days of the immense amount of constraints that there are on the grid today. So you have aging infrastructure as one thing. You have the fact that load growth is growing faster than ever expected, largely because of data centers and the like. And then you have distributed generation. So as you start to think forward now, we have a very complex situation that needs to be simplified. So our approach to that was to take and deliver what we call the One Digital Grid platform. What is it? What it is it is a unified, AI-enabled solution that basically helps utilities go from across their entire life cycle, which starts first with planning, that goes then to operations, and then finally with asset management. And so what this allows you to do, the platform, is it takes what were originally siloed solutions and it gives it a number of central services. Those central services do everything from simple things like having a customer experience that's far less friction, where you do like single sign-on as one example. And then you have AI, which is another word that gets talked about, or an acronym that gets put out there, artificial intelligence, a lot. But we have north of 400 different data scientists on staff that are actually delivering real applications. And the part that I really want to park on for a moment is what we call the Grid Data Hub. So the Grid Data Hub, as I mentioned, these discrete solutions now have the ability to put all of your data into one data layer.
Yeah, really important concept.
Absolutely. And so now if you think about the ability to take all these different data sets, and you not only have these first-party applications that we provide from Digital Grid, but you also have the ability to host third-party applications. This matters because it's this incredibly complex environment. Utilities, you've dealt with one utility, you've dealt with one utility.
Right.
And so you can't have a rip and replace. So the idea is we have first our solutions, but then we also have the ability to take into account existing solutions that they might already have in their stack. So all put together, this is what the Digital Grid platform allows for.
I got to tell you, covering utilities in the energy sector for almost 20 years, consistently I've heard the complaints silos. I've heard the complaints the data is there, nobody knows how to manage it and what to do with it. And the complaint that all these solutions at the grid edge, people have the solutions, but they can't get the data they need to use the solution. So it sounds like, we have to see how it runs, right?
Sure.
But it's really exciting. So you've identified 3 key use cases for the One Digital Grid platform. And you mentioned them, you described them briefly already, but let's start with one. You talked about grid planning and asset management as something that the platform can address. How does it address those things?
Yeah. So let me start first with the fact, can I go back to those 3 things just to remind the listeners?
Sure.
So the first is around planning, operations, grid management. And so if you look at these different ways of ingesting data and the way that a utility manages their grid, the first is around planning.
Absolutely.
So planning, as well as asset management, allows for the very beginning of this funnel of information. And that information basically is packaged into what's called a network model. So that network model is absolutely crucial. And so if you think about it from a planning department perspective, their job is basically to look at the entire grid and make sure that there is a network model. And so historically, what's happened is that would be done there. That's what they call as built. And then later, it is as operated. Sometimes there's a delta between those two things, which can create inefficiencies.
Very often is what I've heard. It's a complaint that I hear all the time. The planners have a plan, the operations guys have operations, and they don't seem to know much about each other.
Yeah, you got it, exactly. So what this does is now by virtue of bringing together, there's one source of truth. And so if I give you one example of a benefit is sometimes, we were with a customer recently, they would have a change that they would make in the planning department. There would then be an edit that would be made in the operations. And what would happen then is there would be this very complicated and long time process by which they're able to make these changes. Those changes for that utility took upwards of a week to finally get done.
So the platform can just do it right away.
It does. In our case, we're able to demonstrate the ability to do it in 7 minutes.
Whoa.
So you can imagine the efficiencies
Yeah.
and the amount of accuracy that you get by doing it that way.
Yeah, I mean, instead of taking a week to find out you need more generation, find out you need to address a transformer, find out you need that there's arcing in a line that might cause a wildfire.
That's right.
All those things happen right away. It's really interesting. Boy, I can't wait to see this in operations. So speaking of operations, another use case that you mentioned is grid operations and resilience. Those are coming with much more significant challenges than ever in the utility system. How does the One Digital Grid platform help with how power system operators address grid operations and resilience? We talked about planning, but just in the operations section.
Yeah. Thanks for so I would be remiss if I didn't point out, because I think I missed this in my definition of the platform, is that they are all ultimately at the service of the applications that we deliver. So if I come back to your question, ADMS would be one example where we're able to utilize this data in order to be able to do a number of...
I want to mention for listeners, ADMS, let's see, Automated Demand Management System, is that right?
No, it is Advanced Distribution Management System.
Yeah, I was close.
Yes.
but that's something that all utilities have in their operations room, and something that Schneider Electric has had a great deal of input on putting in the operations room, and then also more recently putting DERMS in the operations, Distributed Energy Resource Management Systems, to connect with the ADMS, right? I just want our listeners to know what these acronyms are about. Okay?
No, I appreciate that. So Schneider Electric, I think, is notable, put the A in Advanced Distribution Management Systems, happy to say. And so to get back to your question, the question was around how does the platform help enable this? So in one way, it allows for the ability to have a contextualized understanding based on the flow of electrons. So one of the challenges that we heard a lot about is the amount of load growth. So how do you address some of that load growth? Yeah. It's through distributed energy resources. So that would be one example. By using the ADMS, you're able to now integrate those DERs in a much more effective way.
Interesting.
The one thing that I want to make sure that I want to talk about here, because I think that it's very topical, and so I find that it's most useful sometimes to talk about these in the form of a use case. Yeah. So the use case that I want to present to you is major event management. And so I talked about these flows of data. And so imagine you have utilities that, unfortunately, a number of them, particularly on the western part of the United States, are subject to potential arcing, or you have maybe sparks
from wires
that could come off, right? In an event where it's very dry, that could pose a challenge from a wildfire perspective. So the use case that I want to share with you, We have, through the ADMS, the ability to be able to see the flow of electrons, as I pointed out already. We also have partners that we work with company like AI Dash is one that your listeners may be familiar with, and they look at vegetation, because oftentimes vegetation is what is most proximate to the lines, which could then create this wildfire.
The spark hits the vegetation.
Precisely. So now you have all these inflows of data. You're able to look at the vegetation challenges. You're able to look at the real-time analytics that are being provided by the ADMS. And now what you're able to do is you could bring those together, and you could potentially do a PSPS, or you could do an EPSS, which is all around how you are potentially either shutting down or you're enhancing the way that you are flowing those electrons through transmission lines, as an example.
So your system allows the guys in the operations room to see that happening very quickly, almost as soon as it's happening, and respond. That's operations. So I want to go to the last part of the platform's function.
Sure.
You mentioned it already. The flexibility of customer-owned resources is increasingly becoming a viable way to meet these growing loads, and these that happen in different times than they ever have before. A lot more in the morning, a lot more certain other times of the day. And if you can control those demand peaks, and if you can control the costs for the distribution system that go into managing those peaks, then you can really control customer costs. So I'm getting the impression from what you've already said that the One Digital Grid platform addresses that potential for flexibility of DERs, of customer-owned resources. And you said something earlier about the platform allowing better customer engagement.
Sure. Customer
engagement with the customers that have the distributed resources that can then address the peak. But I'm not, what I need you to do, and you guys have a partner, Uplight, that aggregates those distributed resources. So if you've got a platform that somehow can integrate all that activity, you can control, I'm guessing, and this is really a question.
Sure.
You can control those demand peaks and those system costs. Is that correct? Am I getting that?
You have that exactly correct. So you mentioned Uplight. That is one flexibility provider that we work with. So if I can quickly break this down.
Yeah.
There's two elements.
Better than I did, please.
There are two elements of DERMS, as we call it, Distributed Energy Management System. We have a grid DERMS piece that Digital Grid provides directly as a first-party application. Here you're able to look at how all the constraints are within the grid itself. So it gives grid visibility. And then you have what we call edge DERMS. So edge DERMS, in this case, an example that you provided is provided by Uplight. Uplight will have done the customer engagement. They will have signed them up into a program. And now you're able to have all these distributed assets. And then what we're able to do through our ADMS, as an example, is you're able to dispatch those distributed energy resources in order to be able to do peak shaving. So you could pre-cool a house, for example, and then that means that the load that you would need in order to air condition homes, as one example, or EVs is yet another. That's probably one of the more famous ones. Is when you charge that car matters, and so if you do it on off-peak hours, it's more affordable for the car owner, but it's also helps reduce the strain on the grid.
Interesting, and in the past, the utilities that have all these resources on their system haven't been confident that Uplight can deliver what it says it can deliver. But with the platform, I guess you're sending the information to the utility control room in a way that the utility has no questions, no valid questions left. It's like, here's the data, right? That's the point, isn't it?
I think I would phrase it a little bit differently. What I would say is, as it relates to, in this case, Uplight or any flexibility provider, this is an emerging and growing, scaling, if you will, opportunity to be able to use distributed energy resources. What I would say is there's been a lot of pilots. There certainly are demand response programs that are very successful and can be hundreds of thousands of meters that people participate in. What I'm telling you is that by virtue of bringing this together into one platform is, yes, you have the ability to do it in a reliable way. You're able to do it in a safe and effective way, and ultimately be able to provide it in an affordable way.
Yeah, I can't wait to see this in action. It has the potential, as you say, to be the future of intelligent energy. I get it. Okay, one last question before we go.
Sure.
We're at the end of Schneider's 2025 Innovation Summit.
Yes.
There's been a lot of talks here, a lot of really interesting stuff going on. What has struck you in these 2 days? What have you seen? What have you heard that you think is really important to highlight at this point? What are you going to take home with you?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm incredibly thankful. We had north of 2,000 different partners and customers that came to see us. What I would point out is one of the things that we have announced is a new positioning, and it's around being an energy technology partner. And I really take that word technology and partner extremely seriously. So if I think about technology is what Digital Grid is all about. It's all the software solutions that we continue to iterate on. And to me, having the first platform to market is something that I'm extremely excited about, and the opportunity to take that to utilities. The partner piece is what I'll leave you with. What really struck me is that in order to be able to address the grid modernization challenge that we have in front of us, it will take partnerships. So we're saying that we're going to be able to deliver an ecosystem solution, which is a technology solution. But behind those technologies are a series or an ecosystem of partners.
Yeah.
So whether it's Microsoft, which you've already mentioned, whether it's the customer themselves with whom we're engaging, or a future independent software vendors, it's going to be a team sport, is what I would say.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I think we can leave it there. I got to thank you. My guest has been Ruben Llanes, Schneider Electric CEO for Digital Grid. And he's described why he believes the One Digital Grid platform is the future of energy intelligence. I also want to thank our sponsor and host, Schneider Electric. And as always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.